Everyone wants to change their life, but few understand how to do it without giving up in the process. They seek big, fast, immediate results, and when those don't arrive, they get frustrated, blame themselves, and quit. But Arthur discovered something different, a secret so simple it seems absurd, improving just 1% every single day. Stay until the end, because when you hear how this small habit transformed his life, perhaps you will begin to transform yours as well. Once upon a time, in a valley surrounded by green mountains and peaceful rivers, lived a young man named Arthur. He lived in a small house with wattle and daub walls and a window where he could watch the sunrise filter through the trees. His life was simple, but inside his chest dwelt a restlessness that would not leave him in peace. He felt that time was passing, and he remained in the same place. Each morning he promised himself that today would be different, that he would start the project he had left halfway finished, that he would resume abandoned habits. But when the afternoon arrived, those promises withered along with the sunlight. "Tomorrow I'll do better," he would repeat, without realizing that tomorrow never came. Arthur saw how everyone around him seemed to progress. His younger brother had landed a job in the capital. The neighbors' children were preparing to study far away. Even the village children, with their new backpacks, seemed to have more direction than he did. Meanwhile, his life felt paralyzed, like the stagnant water of a well that once wanted to be a river. He wasn't lazy. He was just tired of starting without getting anywhere. Every attempt to improve ended the same way, with enthusiasm at the beginning and discouragement at the end. He would propose waking up early, but by the third day, sleep would overcome him. He wanted to read, learn, and exercise, but at the first sign of difficulty, his strength vanished. Then came the voice that always hurt him. "You're not cut out for this." That phrase haunted him like a shadow. It made him doubt himself and feel small, and although no one knew it, inside he fought a silent battle against his own thoughts. There were nights when he stayed up staring at the ceiling, wondering why it was so hard to change. One day, while walking home, the afternoon breeze brought the smell of damp wood and freshly turned earth. The sound of the nearby river seemed to whisper something he couldn't quite understand. When he crossed the gate, he saw his grandfather, John, in the yard, sitting next to an old chair, polishing the wood with a cloth and a bit of wax. His movements were slow, steady, and full of patience. Arthur watched for a few seconds. His grandfather rubbed the surface repeatedly, though the chair remained dull. "Grandpa," Arthur said with a mix of curiosity and weariness, "why do you spend so much time on that? That chair is old. It's not worth it." The old man smiled without stopping his work. "Because it can still shine. It just needs care." "But you can't even tell," Arthur insisted. "It's because you're looking with haste, my boy. What is worthwhile never changes all at once." Arthur sat on a bench in front of him. The silence of the yard was filled by the sound of the cloth. Swish, a peaceful melody that seemed to match the rhythm of his heart. "I want to change too," Arthur said in a low voice, "but I always end up the same." The grandfather laid the cloth on the table, looked him in the eyes, and replied, "Because you want to run before you've learned to walk. You seek big results, but you forget the small steps." Arthur fell silent. He didn't know what to say. His grandfather's words seemed so simple, but something lit up inside him. Perhaps the problem wasn't a lack of talent, but a lack of patience. That night, lying in his bed, he remembered the sound of the cloth, the soft glow of the chair, and the calm voice of his grandfather. "What is worthwhile doesn't change all at once," he repeated to himself. He closed his eyes with a new idea. Maybe he didn't need to do everything today. Maybe he should just start a little. The rain had ceased by dawn, and the valley air smelled of wet earth. Arthur woke up early, something unusual for him. The echo of his grandfather's voice was still alive in his head, as if those words had found a place to stay. What is worthwhile doesn't change all at once. He went downstairs slowly. The sun barely touched the roofs, and in the yard the old man remained seated in front of the same chair, rubbing with infinite patience. Arthur approached and observed. The colour of the wood was different, warmer, with a soft glow he didn't remember seeing before. He stood in silence for a few seconds before speaking. "It looks like it's really starting to shine." The grandfather smiled. "Do you see? Everything responds to consistency, not force." Arthur sat in front of him, rested his elbows on his knees and said softly, "Sometimes I feel like everything I try slips through my hands. I want to change, but something inside me pulls me back." The grandfather continued to polish. "That happens when you confuse transformation with speed. It's not about doing a lot, but about doing it always." The young man looked at him intently. That phrase hit him harder than any advice. The grandfather took the chair, turned it slightly, and pointed to deep marks in the wood. "Look at these scratches. Some are old, others are new. None disappear completely, but every pass of the wax softens them. It doesn't erase them. It makes them part of the glow. Life is like that. Wounds aren't removed. They are transformed." "And what if we don't have the strength to keep trying?" Arthur asked. "Then do less, but don't stop," the grandfather replied. "There are days to move forward a step and others to simply breathe. But both count if you do them with intention." The young man went silent. At that moment, he understood that his grandfather wasn't just talking about a chair, but about him, about his way of living, of giving up quickly, of always seeking immediate change. The old man continued to speak in a calm voice, almost like a prayer. "When I was young, I also got tired many times. I dreamed of building a workshop, but I had no tools, no clients, no money. On some days, I could barely gather enough wood for a single board, and every night I fell asleep thinking I would never make it. But the next day, I would go back to the workshop, even if only for a few minutes, even if I only sanded one corner. Over time, without me noticing, that small effort became my entire life." Arthur listened without interrupting. In his grandfather's eyes was weariness, yes, but also serenity. The serenity of one who understands that true things are not reached with haste, but with permanence. "And if the world doesn't see that effort?" the boy asked. "It doesn't matter if the world sees it," said the grandfather. "The important thing is that you know you are moving forward. What starts as invisible ends up being inevitable." The wind moved the curtains of the workshop. Outside, the trees dropped lingering droplets. Arthur picked up the cloth carefully. "Can I help?" he asked. The grandfather smiled and nodded. "Of course, but remember, no haste. Every movement is a conversation with the wood. If you force it, it breaks. If you listen to it, it guides you." Arthur imitated the old man's gestures. At first, they were clumsy, then firmer. The sound of the cloth filled the air again, but this time it didn't come only from the grandfather. The two worked together, sharing silences, breathing in the same rhythm. "You know, my son," the old man said after a while, "life has its own tempo. It's not about running faster than others, but about not abandoning your rhythm. Every day a little, every effort, one more layer of shine." Arthur looked at him and, without knowing why, felt a lump in his throat. That morning, he understood something he would never forget. Change is not about intensity, but about permanence. The grandfather took the cloth again and, with one last slow movement, let the sunlight fall upon the newly polished surface. The glow was soft and real, like a smile that took years to appear. Arthur looked down. In that gentle reflection, he felt that something inside him was also beginning to shine. That night, Arthur could not sleep. His grandfather's words kept spinning in his mind. "Do less, but don't stop." He got up before dawn. The sky was still grey, and the air smelled of dew and fresh coffee. He sat at his wooden desk, the same one where he had planned to start tomorrow so many times, and decided to do something different. Not a big change, just a small gesture. He took a blank sheet of paper and wrote a simple phrase. Today, just a little. For years, he had tried to change with force. Today, he decided to do it with patience. Instead of setting out to study for hours on end, he opened a book and read a single page. Not 15, not 10, 1. He closed the book and smiled, not out of pride, but because, for the first time, he had kept his promise. The next day, he repeated, 1 more page, and on the third day, 2. It didn't seem like much, but something inside him was beginning to move, slowly but firmly, like a riverbed after the rain. At work, he began to apply the same rule. Instead of trying to be the best of all, he proposed to improve just 1 detail a day. A sentence written with more clarity, a kind gesture towards someone who expected nothing from him. Small actions that went unnoticed at first, but little by little began to change how others saw him. There was a change in his body as well. He used to promise impossible routines that he would abandon in 2 weeks. This time, he did only 5 push-ups. 5. The next day, 6. By the following week, 10. And when weariness overcame him, he remembered his grandfather's voice. Every day a little. Thus, the movements became a ritual, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, for the feeling of knowing that no matter how small, every victory was his. The days began to have a different rhythm. They were no longer all the same. Some remained heavy, yes, but now they had purpose. The same routine that once suffocated him now sustained him. He didn't seek fast results. He sought consistency. After 30 days, his notebook was no longer a blank sheet. It was full of notes, ideas, and words he previously didn't believe he was capable of writing. In the mirror, his face had a different glow, not that of someone who has already arrived, but that of someone who has finally begun to move forward. On a random Sunday, while the sun streamed through the workshop window, he went to visit his grandfather. He found him in the same place, sitting next to the chair. But this time, something was different. The wood, which before looked tired, reflected the light with a warm radiance. "Look at it," the grandfather said proudly. It wasn't magic. It was days with meaning. Arthur smiled. "I think I'm beginning to understand." "Then you've already taken the most important step," the elder replied. "The rest is to keep walking." Weeks passed, and with them, a new calm arrived in Arthur's life. His days had meaning. His mind was lighter, his body stronger. For the first time in years, he felt he was making progress, even if others didn't notice. But life, like a river that changes its course, always tests the solidity of stones before giving them passage. Winter arrived without warning. The mornings turned cold, the nights endless. The wind whistled through the roofs, and the bare trees tapped on the windows as if they wanted to come in. Arthur kept trying to maintain his routine, but weariness began to weigh on him. The rainy days meant the fire went out early, and sleep would overcome him before he could meet his small goals. One morning he woke up late. He didn't do his push-ups. He didn't read his page. He didn't write in his notebook. "Today I'll rest," he said to himself. "Tomorrow I'll pick it back up." But the next day he said the same thing, and the day after that too. In less than a week, the thread of consistency he had woven with so much effort began to unravel. Then, that voice he thought he had overcome returned. "See, Arthur, you're the same as always. Starting excites you, continuing defeats you." He tried to ignore it, but the voice grew stronger. He felt empty. He walked through the village with his head down, avoiding greetings. He didn't want to look at anyone, nor talk to his grandfather, because deep down he believed he had disappointed him. One afternoon, while returning from work, the sky darkened. The rain fell with fury, soaking his clothes and his spirit. He sought refuge in his grandfather's workshop, shivering with cold. The old man was there, sitting by the fire, carving a piece of wood in silence. "Looks like the storm caught up with you," he said, without looking up. "Inside too," Arthur replied in a thin voice. The grandfather looked at him calmly. "Tell me what's happening." I failed again, Arthur said, looking down. I stopped. I thought this time would be different, but I couldn't keep it up. I lost my rhythm, like always. The old man laid his tools on the table. And what did you do today? Nothing, the young man replied. Then today is a good day to start over. Arthur looked at him, confused. How can you say that if I ruined everything? The grandfather picked up the cloth and smiled. Because nothing is ruined, my boy. When the shine stops, it doesn't go out. It just waits for another pass. But I had moved so far forward. And it is all still there, said the elder. The steps you took are never lost. The path doesn't disappear because you stopped. It just waits for you to want to keep walking. The grandfather extended the cloth to him. Come, just give it one pass with me. Arthur obeyed, rested the cloth on the wood, and moved it slowly. Another, said the grandfather. And one more. Arthur took a deep breath. The sound of the cloth, the smell of wax and wood enveloped him. See, said the grandfather, that is how the shine is recovered, not with haste, but with presence. Arthur closed his eyes. In that moment, he understood that the 1% wasn't a goal, it was a way of life. The lost days didn't matter because every day was a new opportunity. That night, he went home soaked, but with a strange peace. He sat in front of the window, watching the rain run down the glass. He heard the thunder, the wind, and in the middle of all that noise, he heard that sound again, constant, almost sacred. Swish, and he understood that this was the true symbol of consistency, not the perfect effort, but the decision to return after falling. The next day, before dawn, he got up. He didn't do everything he used to do. He didn't need to. Just one thing. One push-up, one page, one word, 1%. The sun began to appear between the mountains, and as the golden light covered the field, Arthur smiled. He had started over, and he understood that this was the greatest victory of all. The months followed their course, and with them, Arthur's heart became more serene. He no longer counted the days as before, nor did he seek immediate results. He had learned something few understand, that great achievements are not born of an impulse, but of a habit, that the force that transforms is not that of one glorious day, but the sum of hundreds of silent days. His discipline had ceased to be a burden and had become his refuge. At work, his colleagues noticed the change. His voice, once shaky, sounded firm. His hands, once insecure, moved with resolve. Even his way of walking seemed different, no longer hurried, but calm, conscious. One day, his boss called him into the office. Arthur thought he had made some mistake, but instead, he heard something unexpected. I've noticed your effort. You don't make much noise, but your results speak for themselves. That afternoon, he went home with a chest full of gratitude. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper, the feeling of being aligned with his purpose. He stopped by the workshop and found his grandfather sitting in front of the finished chair. The evening light covered it completely, making the wood look alive. Is it finished? Arthur asked. Almost, the grandfather replied with a quiet smile. It just needs a bit more polishing to keep the shine. Arthur approached and, without asking, took the cloth. Then let me do it, he said. The old man nodded. As he passed the cloth over the surface, Arthur felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The chair was shining, yes, but so was he. And not because everything had changed, but because he had learned to remain. The grandfather observed him with tenderness. See the difference, he said. It wasn't a stroke of luck. It was many passes. Patience, my son, the same patience you had with yourself. Arthur smiled, looked at his calloused but firm hands, and felt pride. Not in the result, but in the process. In the end, he understood that life is polished like wood, with time, with gentleness, with love, and that the effort doesn't end when you achieve something. It begins when you decide to maintain it. That night, he wrote his last lesson in his notebook. Success is not a destination, it is a rhythm. And those who learn to move with it stop wasting time looking for paths and start creating them. If today you feel the same as yesterday, do not punish yourself. Remember that life doesn't change in leaps, it changes in steps. You might not see the shine yet, but every attempt, every small gesture is polishing something inside of you. Thank you for visiting Fable Haven. If this story touched your heart, remember that your 1% starts today. Don't forget to subscribe for more journeys of growth.